have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the one and the only Awakener podcast. Quite possibly the best podcast in the history of the world. If you look at the subscribership, you might not know it, but the information and material and stuff that I present is epic. This is for people who want to take things to the next level, their comprehension and understanding of what is going on. And let me tell you, most people with 1 million followers out there, if you listen to their material, they do not know squat. I'm going to explain it to you. So Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and all these people who I was kind of like, this is weird at the beginning. Like, who is this guy working for? Is he working for the CIA? Is he an anti-Putin kind of agenda? And then all of a sudden this guy, once he literally meets with Vladimir, he comes right back and he says, oh, Israel was bad about everything. So let me just explain everything to you. You might think you know everything about AIPAC. You might think you know everything about kind of Jewish people that have sponsored various things corporately in America. And you might kind of have an understanding of maybe our banking system and historically for hundreds of years how that's been set up. But let me explain it to you. You understand only 50% of the story. And this is only assuming that if you knew that 100% about that 50%, you are maybe an expert on the US complex and how it has existed and how it's kind of gone historically over the last few hundred years. You do not know anything really about the opposite imperialistic complex that seeks to destroy this. How were the communists created? What is their agenda? Is their agenda to steal the banking system and everything from, this US-backed system? Is their agenda to basically do revolution and change all our national laws? Is it to raise a new world order similar to what America is trying to do? Does America have an imperialist agenda to probably pass around Western values to the rest of humanity, to unite humanity under a new world order, perhaps where nations came together and maybe there was global governance, but maybe it was on the basis of we had democracy and people could vote? Do the communists have their new world order where they want to raise complete totalitarianism and take over everything that the Western world has been backed by? These are questions that everyone kind of needs to talk about. And this is really the problem in our society. To kind of talk about Israel and to talk about their, how they're financing politicians in America, true. And to talk about kind of AIPAC and all their agenda and how they kind of have a military relationship with the United States of America, that's all wonderful. But again, that is 50% of the story. And even if you are 100% right about that 50%, which I guarantee you're not, let's say you're half right about that 50%, you theoretically know 25% about what is going on. You know nothing. 25% in a whole scheme of a standard deviation curve is absolutely nothing. You know nothing. So let's dive into a podcast which talks about the whole scheme of things. Yeah, there is 100% a U.S. industrial complex. But when you identify that there is an opposite industrial complex that seeks to bring about complete evil and totalitarianism in the world, you come to the understanding of why the U.S. complex exists, how it's necessary to protect the Western world and the society that you grew up in, which allows you to have this opinion free on the internet for everybody to see and to critique. And this is just once you understand left and right, yin and yang, and you understand this battle, you come to the conclusion of, listen, it's in our best interest as a human being in politics and to lead a very giant, powerful nation to ensure that this world does not end up in darkness. And this is really what the U.S. industrial complex and historical, tracing all the way back to the era of Britain and everything like that before that, this is really to ensure this world does not perish. This is to ensure that there's some semblance of good that remains in this planet. So once again, if you're one of these people who thinks that you understand everything, you might actually only understand 25% of really what is going on. So this story is really, this podcast was created obviously 8 years ago. I gained 10,000 subscribers very, very quickly, but then I lost them all. And why did I lose them all? I got shut down numerous times. YouTube taken down numerous times. Rumble got taken down. Spotify got taken down. And the latest, obviously, is my podcast has been taken around audio only, where I had thousands of subscribers. So this has been a battle for me versus somebody who's out there with 2 million followers who says, X, Y, and Z. They likely don't know anything. If they knew anything of strategic value, I would like to tell you, they probably wouldn't be on the internet. So this is really a a story about war. This is really a story that goes beyond corruption. A lot of people right now are talking about corruption. They're talking about how there's so much problems of money laundering and all this stuff, which is valid. But take a deeper dive. If there's that much corruption, is there really treason that's going on? Now, let's dive into the latest events that are happening, obviously this Iran war. And everybody told you at the beginning that Iran and the regime change was going to take basically it was going to happen instantaneously. And I was here saying it's going to be a long process. It's going to take forever. We are already in the beginning of a world war. And the purpose of this podcast is kind of dictate where I think things are going and where things will go in the near future. Now, if you notice that these peace treaties and everything are happening with Iran, and then they're being canceled, and then the strait is being opened, and they're being closed again, it's because you can really tell how successful regime change is happening based on what Trump is able to do. So obviously, if everyone who was left in Iran was working with Trump, and whatever remnants of the government or have been taken over by the people and were working with Trump, you would understand that regime change has happened. If there's this giant flip-flop about what's happening, and there's current people saying, no, we're going to close the strait again, really only 50% of regime change has happened. So like I told you from the beginning, this is going to really take a long period of time. Now, Russia has a huge fundamental interest in protecting Iran. And this is really what's happening now, a giant war in regards to obviously Russia and China. So Russia, don't kid yourself, the Soviets are the one completely organizing everything. I've talked about the blackmail of certain politicians. And yes, let's go back to, Jeffrey Epstein was working for Mossad and Robert Axel was working for Mossad. Okay. So what happens if these people were compromised? What happens if these individuals were turned by other intelligence agencies? What if they were double agents? What if another intelligence agency came around and gave them a bunch of money and said, hey, we want you to kind of betray your own kind of host nation? Would that be possible? Again, people only likely know maximum of 50% of the story. So really the blackmail of politicians in regards to Russia and Epstein in relation to the Clinton investigation, which I've talked about on my website, in regards to obviously Trump being her broker, which I've talked about obviously as well. This is really kind of a really interesting thing because Russia is organizing everything because this all goes back to politicians, yes, one of this is Jewish, George Soros, who has infiltrated this global complex of the U.S. and Israel and the Western world and is actively fighting it in a war by Russia and China to seize control over this U.S. complex, to destroy Israel. Yes, there's an opposite agenda. So where is this kind of all going? Well, like I told you, Russia is going to have to protect Iran very, very soon. The reason why is this fissile material that is buried in Iran we've talked about came from the USA. It came from, obviously, Obama setting it all up, and it came from the European leaders and Canada, who are all going to be implicated in this giant war, which means people are going to understand that fundamentally our politicians are not actually working for the Western world complex, and they're not interested in protecting us. They're actually working for the opposite complex that seeks to destroy us. Boom. The whole kind of red pill is going to be served. It's going to be served by force, and people are going to know. Now, the events that are going to unfold, obviously, from the truth is that I've told everybody from the beginning that Trump is going to step aside. And he has to fundamentally step aside, because if he doesn't step aside, where is this all going? This is going to go into basically him being in the White House for the foreseeable future. And you can obviously, the communists are going to be like, well, listen, this guy planned everything. Israel planned everything with this because they wanted like a totalitarian dictatorship all around the world. False. Again, your method of kind of what is happening does not understand why things are happening. Trump is going to have to step aside while the military is going to take over. And there's going to have to be investigations of Trump himself and virtually everybody left and right on an even playing field. Because as you know, everything that has happened in the last 8 years, no civilian court is ever going to touch anything when it comes to treason and obviously betraying fundamental values of the Western world. This is only something a military court will take care of. And what do you need to have military courts? You need a giant war. That's the only way that fundamentally these kind of military tribunals are coming to effect, and there's going to be judgment left and right. And believe me, there will be judgment left and right. Don't be surprised if Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, all the people who are clearly working for the Russians, who have had a historical agenda to wipe out Israel. This is complete fact. Google it. Russian war, Soviet war against Israel, Middle Eastern nations finance. Has anything changed? Absolutely not. This is a giant communist war against Israel, and yes, Jews are involved in the destruction of their own nation, which is really wrapping your mind around this is far deeper than understanding 25% of the material. So, in regards to this military kind of thing that is going to come in the USA very, very soon, I do expect the United States of America is going to control everything in the Western Hemisphere from north to south, which means includes the annexation of Canada, includes Cuba. Obviously, everything is already happening with Venezuela. This is in regards to the Panama Canal. And obviously, Mexico is going to be another big factor in this too, which we're going to see very, very soon. So don't be surprised. Trump's already talking about Cuba. Don't be surprised that Canada is more on the news again. And don't be surprised that Mexico is going to be on the news again. And then once you understand all this, you do understand the Carney and the European leaders and what they're doing and how they're trying to protect their sovereignty and why all of a sudden they're spending money and why they're ganging together and why they don't want to why they're doing what they're doing to stop the spread of this US complex. The reality of the situation may be the US complex might actually stop working as a republic because of the events that are unfolding and actually might become a mini empire ruling from north to south. And it has to, out of necessity, not because it wants to raise totalitarianism, because the enemy is literally embedded from within, and there's no way to root out this enemy other than by force and through tribunals. So all this that is happening is going to accelerate to a point which we've talked about in this podcast for a very, very long period of time. And why, again, can Trump not be the face of this? Because he has to at some point step aside, and people have to accept a new leadership and a kind of a new voice. It's kind of like the end of this in a way, because the left and the stupid people, yes, the stupid people, will never comprehend why Trump was in office for so long. They'll never comprehend really what Trump talked about all the time about the uranium and the corruption and everything happened, and nobody believing him. He's just full of nonsense. So realistically, unfortunately, that's where I think that we're headed. It's going to be an amazing time, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, go back to Rome. This is far more complicated than Rome collapsing. We're not dealing with, an ancient empire that really didn't have the means of communication, and they kind of had to pass notes to and from and directions, and things could go south. We're talking about the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, the strongest military in the history of the world. And this country or nation is collapsing. And what it's going to do to obviously ensure its survival and the protection of the Western world, and really what nations and their people are going to choose to be a part of this, U.S. complex, or whether they're going to be joining the enemy side. And I'll tell you right now, the crazy right, they're going to join the enemy side. Their battle is against Israel in this Western world. And the crazy left, those people in the pink hair, they have the same enemy. They're all the same. Far left, far right, everything that's going on, there's only people like me in the middle with a brain. And if you're following, I'm glad you're part of me. Thank you. Take care.